Time for the final blind nil segment. And guys, I'm going to make it kind of easy. I've got two different stats/records, things that the Chiefs accomplished this year. One on the offensive side, one on the defensive side. I want you to tell me which one seems more impressive to you based on the context of it taking place. The offensive side, big shocker here, Patrick Mahomes, setting the NFL record for the most combined passing plus rushing yards for a quarterback in a season in NFL history, surpassing Drew Brees' mark set back in 2011. Nick, not too far from the time that you were with the New Orleans Saints. So Patrick Mahomes breaking that record in the season following losing Tyreek Hill, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, one of the most explosive players already to be said in NFL history. How impressive is it that Patrick Mahomes, even losing Tyreek with the new weapons, to go up there and have the greatest season in terms of yardage that we've ever seen for a quarterback in the history of the game? That's the offensive one. On the defensive side, probably the underdog here, let's be honest. Last year, the Chiefs as a team had 31 total sacks. They were 29th in the NFL, and I believe dead last in the AFC. We talked about it all offseason, how much the Chiefs needed to improve their pass rush. They signed Carlos Dunlap. They drafted George Karlaftis, and then they had guys internally, Joe Cullen, that addition of Joe Cullen, and what he's been able to do to get the most out of the defensive line. We've seen career highs for guys like Mike Dana. Colin Saunders has stepped up and made some plays. Even Turk Wharton was playing really well before he got injured. Obviously, Frank Clark came in, changed his body, and Chris Jones has been a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. This year, 55 sacks as a team, second most in the NFL. So was it more impressive for Patrick Mahomes after losing Tyreek Hill to set the record for most passing/rushing yards in NFL history for a quarterback, or going from dead last in the AFC and 29th in the NFL in team sacks in one offseason, similar to what he did on the offensive line, where he just kind of fixed it one offseason? Same thing as far as pass rush, bringing opposing quarterbacks down again, 55 sacks, second most in the NFL, and one of the best marks in franchise history. I believe second in franchise history as well, only behind the 1990 team that I believe had 60 sacks in Derek Thomas's second year. Tucker, I'm going to go with you first. Which one is more impressive?
This is probably a hot take, but I'm going to take the defensive sacks one, and here's why. I'm going to take the sacks one because this defensive front was relatively unchanged from last year. You add George Karlaftis to it. You add Carlos Dunlap in for Alex Okafor. Basically, that's a one-for-one swap. You ended up having Turk Wharton, who's one of your best pass rushing interior guys that gets hurt. So I think relatively unchanged outside of Joe Cullen adding. You get a lot more production from the guys that were on the team.
You lost like half of Frank Clark. He lost a lot of weight, so he's a completely different. He's a completely different player.
That's true. We got skinny Frank out here.
Slim Frank.
Slim Frank. I do think that's what sticks out to me about that one is every offseason we go through this whole song and dance of the Chiefs need to add an elite pass rusher, right? They need to add a pass rusher that gets more production. That's obviously always cut Frank Clark and then add somebody else to it, right? This seems like the song and dance we've been through for 2 off seasons now. And those guys just went out there and said, yeah, we don't really need to do that because we'll just increase our production ourselves. Chris Jones having a career year obviously helped. 15 and a half sacks is a great year. And I joked with Craig Stout when we were at a holiday on Saturday, and he said, Chris Jones, it's his 15th. And I was like, that's as many as the Chiefs had last year because they just didn't get to the quarterback, as you mentioned, BJ, 29th. But seeing them be able to get home, not only the guys on the edge, but the guys on the interior. Colin Saunders played very well in the pass rush. He's getting after the quarterback when he's not, running routes. You had guys on the interior. It was the versatility of those guys too. George Karloff just moving on the inside, sometimes getting some pressure from the inside, being able to move those guys all around like chess pieces has been so good. And maybe it is George Karloff just to thank for this. Maybe he's the reason that he has to thank for the versatility. He's
just bonusing him a few sacks, just to
give him to him. Round up, get him that title. Go ahead and
push the quarterback towards it.
There's going to be a case to be made once it's all the dust settles and the season is done. We'll go back and really get into this because postseason sack, they just mean more. So we'll see what happens.
Like the SEC just means more. I do think that it's interesting when looking at that unit and their production last year with this year, because basically essentially stayed the same with the core group of guys that they have there on that defensive line. And I think that's more impressive. I think that's the most interesting aspect of it. Yeah.
Nick, what are you taking?
I honestly, like, the defense to me has been the most impressive thing that I've seen. I mean, just getting, like, because to me, and you can check my receipts, but I told you guys when this happened that this offense is going to be better without Tyreek. And you can go check like the first couple episodes, because, you know, Tyreek was such a bright spot that I felt like balls were forced his way when they shouldn't have. And they tried to get ways, and it was easy for teams to say, okay, who are we going to bracket? You know, who are we going to cover? And it's Tyreek. You know, eliminate Tyreek, and you go, okay, we're going to go Kelsey. Now it's like, I don't know who they're going to get. And now you got Kadarius Toney emerging late, right? So, and McKinnon, all this stuff. So that's amazing. But the sacks, getting production from the killer D's, Dana Dunlap, right? Like the guys who don't expect it, you know, the guys who don't expect them to get production, and then having the defensive backs, right? The DBs getting sacks, you know, so all the killer D's on this defense are really getting all this.
The guy loves the D's.
I tried to hold it together. I really did. Oh,
Nick loves him some D's.
So yeah,
I wasn't gonna. He was on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt.
I'm sorry.
him.
I've done that a few times. I do that a lot. I'm sorry.
I tried to go as long as I could. But yeah, man. I mean, from everyone was like, and it really, like, honestly, who did they bring in on defense? They bring in Justin Reed.
Yep.
And then they drafted who they draft?
Half the defense.
Yeah, half the defense. Did they? Who else did they bring in? Who was else a free agent signing?
Hey, Carlos Dunlap, but like
Dunlap, but
Dunlap was
massive,
never going
right?
to be like. No, Dunlap was never going to be a guy that was going to be. I don't think that they didn't plan on him being like the starter. He was always a rotational guy, right? Is what I'm trying to say.
So, but here's the thing too, is that this defense, people say this defense sucked this year. This defense, just like last year when it had like not a lot of production, Mahomes, this offense put this defense in some really, really bad positions throughout the year. And this defense, you know, this defense won some games for the Chiefs last year and this year. So for them to sort of retool through the draft, are you kidding me? And for it to hit consistently, and for these players to get production, and for them to hold on to Frank Clark, because I think a lot of people would have cut Frank Clark, honestly. No. I really do. And I think not doing that shows you how much of a leader he is within a locker room, and what he does on those plays that he's not supposed to get a sack. Like, it's pretty cool, his discipline. So I love what they've done with this defense. And it's like not the usual route where it's like, let's sign 3 free agents for high money, put them in, let's do it. It's like, no, let's draft and let's get production from our second and third year guys. It's so cool.
If only there was a media person that's been defending Frank Clark, telling you that he's valuable in that locker room since before everyone hated him and wanted him off the team.
Yeah.
Somebody was trying to say, like, he does bring value. Ask the guys in the locker room. It's not lip service.
No.
And now we're getting in his time of the year. Talked about it earlier. Frank Clark, 5th in NFL history in postseason sacks, and could move right up on that. He is 5 sacks shy of being tied for the most sacks by anybody in the history of postseason NFL football.
Who's got
Willie
the most?
McGinnis. Willie McGinnis.
Well, Patriots been there for 10 years.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
I was looking at the list earlier. Like, there's no active players anymore. He has more than Von Miller. But he has more than guys like Neil Smith and like Richard Dent, all of these like old school players that were on really successful teams that played for a long time. I mean, he gets one more sack, he's tied with like Reggie White. Like, it's silly, the names and numbers he's talking about, and he's going to have an opportunity. So yeah, as much as I wanted I was waiting for you guys to talk about Patrick Mahomes and the offense, and I was going to disagree. We're actually going to have a consensus here, because I think it's more impressive what the defense has done. But mind you, and people watching this probably understand, and I'm going to wholeheartedly say this is a great example of like entitlement for Patrick Mahomes, and we just expect him to be great.
Yes.
We didn't necessarily expect the Chiefs pass rush to go from one of the worst in the NFL as far as bringing down quarterbacks to then one of the best in the NFL. Is like, wow, that's impressive. It's like, well, your quarterback just did something nobody's ever done. Like, yeah, but that's what he does. Like, we expect him to go out there and do this. And I think on this show, at least, I know we talked a lot about the ability that Patrick Mahomes, that I say it all the time, the mental acuity he has to read a defense, go where the football needs to be, as opposed to the pressure to feel like we have one of the best wide receivers and one of the most explosive players. We got to get him the ball. We've got to figure out ways to get him the ball. And now we're just going to take what they give us and we're going to throw the ball to freaking Justin Watson or whoever else we need. And you look at the number of stats, like you look at the stats of like the number of receivers on the Chiefs that have at least 250 yards receiving, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys have at least 250 yards receiving for the Chiefs this year. They have spread the ball around. Every week it's been a different dude. And we've said over the last few weeks, like Travis Kelce, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Juju Smith-Schuster have not put up big numbers over the last few weeks. It's been different guys. Patrick Mahomes is still putting up, not against the Raiders, but the week before against the Broncos, like had 320 yards passing in some of these games, and nobody has 130 yards. It's not like Kelsey's putting up 130 yards. So I think it's entitlement, but I agree with you guys that it's more impressive the defensive turnaround, which again is saying something considering how special Patrick Mahomes' season was, Tucker.
I think it is kind of crazy too when you talk about the Patrick Mahomes thing. Ronald Jones, I believe my number could be wrong, but I believe he was the 21st Chiefs player to score a touchdown this year. So you're talking about 21 different Chiefs players scoring a touchdown in the year where the Chiefs were supposed to fall. This was supposed to be a rebuilding year. Remember the Chiefs weren't supposed to win the win the division and get the number 1 seed, and they weren't supposed to make the playoffs, and they weren't supposed to do all this stuff, but they've done the opposite of what everyone expected them to do. But it is insane what this offense has been able to do.